Join me as we talk all things true crime.
Made contact and shattered.
The missing 4-year-old. The parents have called in and advised that the mother has went through a wall, came home, now they can't find her.
Chad, where are Lori's kids? They've been missing for 4 months. You have nothing to say?
4 were stabbed multiple times and were likely asleep during the attack. Some had defensive wounds.
Most of them had just like one that was the lethal stab wound.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave. Once I told a lie, and I told my family, I had to keep lying.
McSherman is a demon.
We haven't cleared anybody.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is a Friday night ATS News live stream. I'm so happy to see everybody. I see Pointer Lover, Anna, Delana, Julia, Adrian, Melly is here, Petunia. Thanks, everyone, for coming in here for this stream. Hit that like button if you haven't done so. So we have been reading through Howard Blum's book. And this is part 3. So it's not going to be that long of a live stream. I've got packing to do for my trip. But luckily, the part 3 isn't that long. So the book is called When the Night Comes Falling. It is based around the Idaho4 murders. And let me just share my screen. So yes, we are on part 3. And I'll just be reading this to you guys. While I read this, I like to show the visuals. So I will change up the screen. But first, what I want to do is kind of talk about the updates in the case. And the best way to kind of do that, I think, is to play Court TV's 9-minute video on it that came out a day ago. It's called Bryankohberger's Attorneys Want the Trial Moved to Boise. So they want a change in venue, and they've kind of been fighting this for months now. So let me just switch up the screen, and I'll pull that up, and we will get into the updates in the case. Again, the trial is set for next summer. And if there's not any delays or anything like that. So next summer is expected that this will begin, and it's going to be a couple months long. So first off, I wanted to thank Pointer Lover. And I don't know if Sherry's here yet, but thank you guys so much for gifting me stuff from the baby registry. And House Huddle has a live stream tonight on the Watts case. So I want you guys to definitely check that out. Like I said, this won't be a long live stream. We're just going to go through this part 3 and then close out because we want to make it through this book, before the trial. And we will. All right. Give me 1 second, guys.
We turn now to the Idaho student murders case against defendant Bryankohberger. His attorneys filed a motion this week to move the trial to Boise. Now, they claim Kohberger cannot get a fair trial in Latah County, quote, because of the pervasive, inflammatory, and often inaccurate publicity and the small size of the jury pool. Well, they wanted the trial moved to Ada County, which is about 300 miles away. Now, that's the same county, if it sounds familiar, where Chad and Lori Daybell were tried. Now, earlier this year, Kohberger's team contracted a trial consultant and a change of venue expert to conduct a survey of 400 residents in Latah County to determine the impact of pretrial publicity on the community. Well, prosecutors tried to stop that survey, but Judge John Judge ultimately agreed to let them continue as long as it didn't violate his gag order. Well, Kohberger is accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students in their off-campus rental home in November of 2022. Here's a look back at the victims.
On November 13th, 2022, at around 4 a.m., 4 college students were brutally murdered. Each would soon become household names, known for their deaths, but remembered for their lives. Kaylee Gonsalves, she was 21 and born in Concord, California. Her family describes her as sociable, strong, and a hard worker.
Kaylee was our middle child out of 5. She was always competitive. She was smack dab middle, so Steven and Olivia were a little bit older. And Aubrey were a little bit younger, so she kind of had to figure out where to fit in, and she definitely did.
Maddie Mogan, also 21, was best friends with Kaylee since childhood. Maddie's family says she was known for her offbeat humor and her ability to make others laugh and smile.
She was so great. She lit up every room she'd come in, and she was just so positive and fun, and we love her and miss her so much.
20-year-old Xana Cornoto grew up in Idaho and was a talented gymnast as a child. In high school, she played volleyball, track, and soccer. Xana was going to school for marketing.
Xana was such a light in my life and so many others, and she knew and understood me more than anyone. Losing her is the hardest thing I've ever had to go through, and it has left me heartbroken.
20-year-old Ethan Chapin loved sports and country music. He was Xana's boyfriend, a triplet who was incredibly close to his family.
We are eternally grateful that we spent so much time with him. And I want to remind you that that's the most important message that we have for you and your families, is to make sure that you spend as much time as possible with those people, because time is precious and it's something you can't get back.
As of right now, Kohberger is scheduled to go on trial next June. The judge has set a date of August 29th for a hearing on that change of venue motion that's being opposed by prosecutors. All right, still with me to discuss, civil rights attorneys Adante Pointer and Sue Ann Robinson. Sue Ann, I'll start with you. Let's put this on the table. You know, change of venue is not easy to get. Basically, you know, it's something that you need to show that this would really affect the rights of the defendants. Do you think they have a shot in this one?
Honestly, I think in this world today, the case is already an international sensation, a national sensation. It's bigger than the community already. So people already have so much information about the case. So the thing that they're trying to prevent by moving the venue could really happen anywhere, arguably, because people have information about the case everywhere. So typically the lawyer would argue, hey, this is a small venue, this is a small town, everyone here that's in the jury pool would be affected by this case and be unable to be unbiased. But that could prospectively happen anywhere in the information age, right? Where everyone has access to information about the case.
Yeah, that's basically what the state argues. They're basically saying moving it is not going to change the familiarity of the jury pool. This is such a widely publicized case. But that publicity, Adante, they claim in their, you know, in the studies that were done by the folks that they hired, that it was emotion evoking. It was inflammatory, it was misleading, and it was not benign. And I do want to point out Moscow, where it would take place, 41,000 residents. Boise, almost 240,000 residents. Big difference there.
Absolutely, that's a big difference. I mean, you have about half as many people in one city as the other. The question really is, although the defendants, and they've done a great job with the studies, but as any of us know, the way in which a question is asked will oftentimes impact the way in which it is answered. And so, although they have these polls and they have these studies, I would think the prosecution in and of itself would raise that point, but also as the other guest analyst raised, just because you move it from one location doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get a less of an impacted or affected jury pool when you have a case of this magnitude. And
Hey, Paul. Hey, Debbie Fox. Good to see you guys. Just wanted to ask chat if you guys think that they need a change of venue for this to be a fair trial for Kohberger. Like this guy is saying, like, just because you change the venue doesn't mean that it's really going to have an impact on the jury. Like, everyone knows this case, in my opinion. It's very, very popular. And then I seen House Huddle asked, I still don't know how the DNA is constitutional without the warrant prior. Are you referring to the touch DNA on the sheath, because they compared that DNA to trash that was outside of the house. So once the trash is like out, they're able to compare it. And then they did a cheek swab once they arrested him. So I don't know if I'm understanding the question. So yeah, they were able to go through his trash and compare it, I believe, to whatever was in there of the father's. And it was close enough that they made the arrest and then gave him this cheek swab. So you, just like in the Gilgo Beach killer, they, you know, got his leftover pizza but they didn't have his name without the ancestry information. Yeah, I'm trying to remember how all this went down. It's been so long. Trying to think. If anyone remembers how all that went, I think they just followed his car and then grabbed his trash out of the trash can. Does anyone remember? I think it was the car that really tipped them off to his name. Like somebody on campus compared the vehicle, somebody at WSU. Trying to remember.
Frankly, all of this, the whole area is small town America. So this case has an outsized effect within that general community. And I just don't see a move from one to the other as being such a difference maker that it's going to impact the way in which the juries look at the trial and ultimately whether or not the defendant has a fair chance of justice.
Yeah, and to be specific, the defense must establish that there's a reasonable probability of prejudice to their client or to the defendant Kohberger in this case. And there's a couple of other things that they cited, Sue Ann. And these sort of touched home with me, that Latah is a very small, close-knit community. The surveys suggest that the community has prejudged the case, including conviction and death, and that major employers in the area are law enforcement and the University of Idaho. I found those to be particularly persuasive.
Those are very compelling facts for the defense, for them to put in there and say, hey, listen, not only is this a very small town, but a lot of the town actually has connections to the case. And I think that, you know, it's going to come down to the judge and what they decide, but I think it's something that in any case has to be borne out during voir dire. The attorneys have to be able to look at the jurors and ask them the question, despite what you know, despite your life experience, are you going to be able to be fair and impartial? And they have to trust and believe in that, because that's the cornerstone of the trial system.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it was. So they got the information, and no, Paul, he didn't change his plates. He still had Pennsylvania plates. So somebody looked up the vehicle that he had, some on-campus officer, I believe, compared it to his, and then they started stalking him, well, surveying him. And then, like Delana said, they stopped him numerous times on the road trip on the way back. I agree. I don't think it was coincidence. At first, they reported it that it wasn't coincidence and that they purposely stopped him. And then all of a sudden, they tried to backtrack that. So that was all over the place. And then once they were able to kind of get him to, once he was in Pennsylvania, then they had the swap, the sample of his DNA from the trash. But yeah, the whole ancestry and touch DNA was controversial. I agree. It's kind of a new method that they're using. And I agree, Delana, they purposely did that. Oh, I forgot to put it in there for this one. I'll link it in chat. And it's on my community page also. Give me 1 second.
And no doubt, and I think another cornerstone of Dante is this idea that the community wants justice. So you do everything you can to keep it in that community. And so what role does that play in a judge's decision?
Well, I think it's definitely a factor. I think it's a heavy factor in the sense that the community wants to take part in meting out justice, being a part of this process. And so, I think the judge will give that a large consideration as a judge weighs the different factors before him.
The other thing, Sue Ann, involves precedent. There's some very recent precedent, and we mentioned it, right? We have the Daybells who were sent out to Boise because of the same reason. And I would absolutely, maybe even higher. But, the publicity surrounding that case, very similar. And I think this case may even have more publicity than that one. And we know judges like precedent. And even though it is something rarely granted, that precedent may certainly help the defense as well.
Certainly. I think the Daybell case is a good example of a case where, changing the venue, the court decided it's better to be safe than sorry, better to let them have a different venue than have to put everyone in the community through the trial more than once, or possibly just have to do the trial again somewhere else because they go up on appeal and are successful. So I think the Chad Daybell trial is certainly good precedent for the defense. But again, it's going to come down to whether or not the judge thinks, listen, has the defense met these prongs? Have they met these? Do I feel like the jury here is not going to be able to be fair and impartial? And I think anywhere they go, they're going to have an issue. So it's a very tough argument to say, hey, if we stay here, it's not going to be fair in a situation where the trial is the information, the facts, everything about the case has been so widely publicized.
Yeah, fair enough. But at the end of the day, Dante, no matter how it turns out, it's good lawyering because it preserves this issue on appeal.
Absolutely. If I'm the defense, I'm vigorously fighting for this motion. I'm asking the judge, change the venue. I'm pleading with the judge to change the venue. And if he goes against me, I'm going to use that as my basis to come back around on appeal. Nice. So it is very good lawyering and a strategy at its finest.
It's all part of.
So I think in order to just avoid this whole appeal process, they should just change the venue. Personally, those are my thoughts and feelings on it. All right. So now that we got the update out of the way, again, they're having a hearing in August to determine if they will or will not change the venue. So we'll be keeping an eye out for that, and we'll report on that as we go through this book as well. So again, we are on part 3 of this book. Let me just share a different screen while we go through this. Okay, yeah, so these visuals are from the documentary that I put together. And actually, this documentary might explain the whole touch DNA stuff more because it's centered around the investigation. So I'm just going to play this as our visual while I read that other page, okay? So we are on part 3. It says, Christian Martinez was a high-spirited, very sociable fellow, and he and his wife, Holly, had a large circle of friends. It was an older group since Martinez had served in the military and had a few years on most WSU undergraduates. Martinez also pulled together a lot of people with his family background similar to his, students and recent grads with roots in the Latino and Hispanic community. And they were a fun, loving crowd, always up for something. When they weren't off hiking in nearby mountains, they'd fly to Vegas for the weekend or simply head out for some beers in downtown Pullman, hitting the Emporium and stubble fields. And so as the new semester edged closer, one of Martinez's buddies, Zach Cartwright, reached out to him with the promise of a final semester bash. Cartwright was a man of many parts. He had a recent doctorate in food science, but in addition to his research job at a local food processing company, as part of a team devising an indigenous procedure to extract moisture from crops, he made time to moonlight as a yoga instructor and a DJ. On Sunday, he eagerly explained he had a gig DJing at an afternoon pool party at the Grove, an off-campus housing complex over in Moscow. Should be wild. Tell your friends, he urged. All my friends? As Martinez began spreading the news, the chance encounter a few days earlier with his new neighbor's father came to mind. The old man had no valid claim on him, and his son certainly wasn't a friend, barely an acquaintance. In fact, but Martinez decided it'd be an act of kindness, and it wasn't as if he'd have to babysit the guy. A pool party on a sun-baked August afternoon, one of the last blowouts before classes would begin, was certain to attract a crowd. It'd be just sort of a gathering where even a newcomer could make friends. Martinez texted Bryan the details, including the Southview Avenue address in Moscow. Thanks. I have to run and get trunks, Bryan texted and replied. For the locals, particularly the old-timers, the 19 or so miles between Washington State campus in Pullman and the University of Idaho just over Washington State line in Moscow, Idaho, was known as the Losers Walk. The name was a bit of nostalgia, a throwback to the 60-year span ending in 1968, when two schools had a fierce football rivalry. Tradition had it, when the final second had ticked off to the end of the fourth quarter, the students from the defeated school would file out of the stadium and set out on the Losers Walk back to campus, their heads presumably hanging mournfully low. But there was nothing hangdog in Bryan's mood that August afternoon when he set out on pretty much that identical route between the two campuses. He zipped down the two-lane 270 East in his Hyundai for the quick 12-minute trip to Moscow. It was Bryan's first trip to Moscow. Many more would come in the months ahead, and the town's name must have been a puzzlement. It had only a tangential connection to the magisterial. Okay, so the one thing that we've learned about this author is he uses this language to describe things that's just like over the top. Well, just get on with it, with the sentence without all these like these, you know what it is. If you've been following so far, this is just ridiculous. Exceedingly thin one, even at that. But in the 1870s, according to the most popular theory, one of the valley's founding fathers discovered the fledgling community needed an official name before the U.S. Postal Service would deliver its mail. He had been born near Moscow, Pennsylvania, and then spent some years in Moscow, Iowa. And so he decided a name that had already been satisfactory might as well have been trotted out again. And after all the years of townsfolk were still quick to drive home the point that there's no connection to Russian City, with no attempt at irony, they never missed an opportunity to inform visitors that their town's name was pronounced to rhyme with Costco. So he just did a whole paragraph right there about the history of the name Moscow. Like, oh my gosh, this book so far, it's filled with so much unnecessary fluff. Like, just get on with that. But no matter how you said it, Moscow had always been a pretty place. In the spring, the valley sparkled with bright waves of violet, wild camas plants. Then in summer, the fields of amber wheat came in, only to grow more resplendent when the deepening shades of autumn took hold. And at the same time, on the mountains on the edge of town, a glorious and extravagant display broke out. But soon enough, the snow blew in and buried everything as far as the eye could see in a pristine white cloak. It was easy to understand why generation after generation of adventurers had decided to stop here. First came the restless pioneers and the prospectors who had headed off to follow in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark. And then there were the enterprising homesteaders who carried along by rolling wheels of wagon trains and the federal promise of 160 acres tracts of vacant land under the Homestead Act, and finally came to ambitious entrepreneurs who headed west in big, hulking locomotives, puffs of steam blowing across the ancient trail where the Nez Perce tribe had galloped on their spotted Appaloozas. They all came and swiftly decided there was no reason to go any further than this splendid little valley. A little more than a century and a half since its founding, there was still a brashness and frontier wildness to Moscow, despite its having now swelled in 25,000 inhabitants. The quaint veneer, however, disguised something untamed, savage, and reckless, and it never took much to turn it all loose. Deep down, pretty Moscow was pretty poison. And so sure, Moscow was a university town. But while it was a good place to be a student, it was an even better place to party. The University of Idaho came into being after President Abraham Lincoln, in the midst of the Civil War, signed the Land Grant Act. This law gave states the right to sell off vast tracts of land as long as the proceeds would be used to endow colleges where students could receive architectural and mechanical training. Boise, according to the perhaps so sick at this way this guy writes, recounted with glee in several state histories, and had originally been designated by the legislature as the site for new institution of higher learning. But the practical Boise city fathers argued that they'd rather be home to the new state penitentiary, a more certain boon to the local economy. And so by default, in 1889, the University of Idaho convened its first class in Moscow. Things didn't get off to an auspicious start. 40 students assembled for the entrance exam and none passed. The dismayed university president decided to run the institution as a prep school until he could get the student body up to the college level speed. These days, however, the University of Idaho spreads out over 800 well-landscaped acres and is home to about 8,800 undergrads. And standards have been ratcheted up considerably from the days of the school's ill-prepared inaugural class. Professors will tell you that their top students are as good as you'll find in the Ivy League. But they are also quickly to add, with a candor shaped by frustrating experience, the rest leave a lot to be desired. Nearly 3/4 of those who apply are accepted. And that sort of laissez-faire selectivity helps shape a student body that seems more diligent about putting in time in the student rec center, famous for its state-of-art climbing wall, than the dreary library building that rises up like an oppressive concrete block, monolith on Rayburn Street. And the school officials seem pretty complacent about their priorities too. On the day when Brian made his way to Moscow, a long yellow banner had been scrolled across the approach to August Administration Building. Number 1, best value in the West, it boasted, as if advertising one of the motels that lined nearby Pullman Road. And while national surveys buried the U of I pretty far down the list when it came to academics, time after time it ranked as the best party school in the state. Central to all the good times on and off campus was the school's deep commitment to Greek life. There were, at last count, a total of 34 fraternities and sororities tied to the school, with about a quarter of the student body, 2,100 kids affiliated. And sure, the frats and the sororities, as they drum earnestly into their pledges, have an impressive inventory of high-minded aims like building lifelong friendships and doing good work in the community. But take a stroll down Greek Road on the Saturday night, and the ear-popping noise will signal that there's one hell of a party going on. The kind of clamorous spirit ran deep in Moscow. For decades, after all, the town's best-known address had been 304 West A Street, the site of its most stylish brothel. Then there was a misconception that a little town like this, with its oh-so-quaint Main Street coffee houses and ice cream parlors, was a bastion of law and order. Yet back in 1945, Carol Ree Brink, who had grown up in Moscow, had seen enough to write that the quick, wild urge to hurt and kill was inventorate in the town. And she'd known this simmering danger firsthand. Her grandfather, a doctor who had been one of Moscow's founding fathers, had been shot dead for no apparent reason in 1901 by a deranged local. More recently, in 1969, Janice Foilis, an 18-year-old co-ed, had been working behind the counter at the Tip Top Cafe late on a frigid, cold December night when her head was smashed into pieces with a claw hammer. It was a murder that was never solved. The same disquieting strangeness, too, surrounded the still unsolved disappearance a decade later of another pretty young woman, Gayla Shaper. Just 28, she had gone out to feed the horses in the corral on the farm she shared with her husband one summer afternoon, and she was never seen again. The only clue after all the years of remains was a bizarre note, the letters cut from a magazine, and she'd received days before she'd vanished. "You have sold out to Satan." Then there was the patch every local cop wears on the shoulder of their uniform. It depicts a clock tower set to 149. That was the badge number of Officer Lee Newbill, who was killed in 2007 when another wild gunman went racing around the town on a shooting spree after killing his wife and church sexton, finally blowing his own skull into bloody pieces with his assault rifle. Little Moscow, the locals grumbled to one another in hushed voices, had its share of drug trafficking too. In fact, the rising statistics on drug arrests detailed in the annual police reports made it clear that narcotics was a growth business in the town. There was also residents who were beginning to worry, another reason for concern. A Moscow police detective lieutenant had been assigned to the 4-county task force formed to wade into the dirty waters of pedophilia. To his astonishment, he made close to a dozen arrests, and the task force had a black dog over 2,200 cases in the area it considered worth digging into. Still, Moscow had always been a God-fearing, churchy town, and today there were more than 24 Christian congregations. On Sunday morning, the collective chiming of the church bells rose up in a loud swell. The largest congregation, about 2,000 strong and growing, however, was the Christ Church. Yet the Kirkers, as the parishioners call themselves as a sign of their allegiance to Mother Kirk, an old Scottish name for the Reformed Church, were in many ways a political movement as much as a religious one. Doug Wilson, their shrewd, articulate, fire and brimstone, one moment a measured intellectual, the next pastor and an all-around mastermind, has made it clear that he has far-reaching ambitions. He wants to turn Moscow into a theocracy, a Christian town. Walk down Main Street and it's as if the battle lines have been literally drawn. On one side of the street is the Kirker Empire, a cafe, a bookstore, a K-12 school, a college, and a publishing house. On the other side are places frequented by everyone, but the Kirkers have high hopes in increasing both their flock and their domain. They have ties to 2 real estate offices in the town that are set on attracting the sort of zealots who are fed up with woke America and the noisy, interfering deep state. If you put God back in Idaho, then God will always protect Idaho, is their selling pitch. And Moscow, if the Kirkers have their way, will be the capital of the redoubt as the new fiercely conservative American frontier has been christened. Only the Kirkers' path to godliness and political power, as many seething people in town see it, had been paved with a lot of truly troublesome missteps. There was the former Christ Church deacon who was sentenced to 2 years in prison for possession of child P. The member who was found guilty of injury to a child because of his relationship with a 14-year-old girl, another who was convicted of sex offenses involving children, and in addition, there were the dozens of women who went public to allege that they had been essayed by members of the church. No ifs, ands, or buts, a local lawyer predicted with a combative resignation. There's a civil war getting ready to erupt in the streets of Moscow. Such then were the fault lines that lay beneath the outwardly pleasing little town that Bryan entered for the first time on the boiling hot August afternoon. It was a moment when he still had no awareness of the town's troubled history or the seething forces rolling around the Polos. Or it would not be long before the very mention of his name would be synonymous with Moscow, with a previously unimagined evil. So pretty much I just read like all the history of Moscow. Like, I don't care. Like, I just feel like this book, like, first off, how does this guy even know that neighbor that the father said, like, oh, my son's shy, like, you know, can you introduce him to people, or whatever Bryan's father had said? Because the neighbor did come out saying that they did have that conversation. How do we know that they even had this like talk about this pool party? And like, I want to get to the pool party and his interaction with the neighbor. Like, I don't care about the history of the college or the politics in the town and the way that like the environment and climate is in the town. So it's just this book. Why did we commit to it? I've started it. I have to finish it though. But guys, first off, Sherry, thank you so much for the baby gift, for the baby registry. I just can't thank you and everyone else enough who have already bought some gifts on there. It's just amazing. And I'm very lucky to have such nice subscribers like you guys. Hey, Cindy. Hey, Kel, Mesra. Good to see you guys. So if you guys joined later, we did go through some of the updates. Hey, Scott, of the case, basically the most recent update. Hey, Johnny, serving some tea. It's okay that you're late. I guess I'll forgive you since you were stopping at your mother's like a good son. If you missed it though, Johnny, the latest update with Kohberger is the defense is begging for a change in venue. They feel that he would get a better trial, a more fair trial if he was tried outside of Moscow. So they're hoping to take it to Boise, Idaho, and have a jury pulled there. They will get back into court for that discussion with the judge around August. So in August, we'll hear if the judge will grant them a change in venue or not. So that is the latest in the case. I mentioned that this was going to be a short live stream. So part 3 was basically all about the history of the town. Debbie, I have it on my community page, but I think I have the link still kind of copied. So I'll put it through. Oh, wait, no, it's not. Give me a second. Moscow would be the wrong place, in my opinion. I agree, Adrian. And why not just skip the likelihood of an appeal? You know, like just grant it now, in my opinion. Just grant the change of venue now. That way we don't have to worry about future appeals for a change in venue. But this case is, world renowned for sure. So even in Boise, Idaho, I think that they're going to have a hard time finding a jury who, has never heard this case. But then I guess they start asking the question of, can you sit on this jury and, not let your bias affect your decision. So we shall see. We'll hear back when they go back to court. Oh my gosh, this is so annoying. I'm trying. Okay, thank you, Point and Lover, because I cannot get this link to work like on my phone. Either way, I really appreciate you guys, and thank you, Sherry. This is going to be my last live stream. Oh my gosh, I just realized I got to finish putting together this Watts video for next week. So there's going to be a short video that I'm going to upload maybe Thursday next week. So I hope you guys watch that. Obviously, it's not going to be a live stream, but it is going to be like a short, interesting video, in my opinion. Hi, Amanda. Good to see you. We are closing out. We did a quick live stream and read through of part 3 of the book. And we did the updates from the court sessions about a change in venue. And that's pretty much all we have to do. Got lots to do. So there is a channel that says the case is a conspiracy. Oh, I'm sure. It is very interesting because there's a lot of like hush hush, and obviously the gag order has a lot to do with the hush hush too. So there's just a lot of stuff that we want to know about in this case. You know, we haven't heard the 911 call. We haven't heard why Dylan went back to bed and went down to Bethany's room instead of calling 911 after she saw a masked man in the house. You know, so there is a lot of things to this case that are like puzzling. But as far as it being like a conspiracy, like I think that they have the right guy in custody personally. Like, of course, I'm ready to hear the rest of the evidence laid out and all that. But I think that Brian is the person who did this. I just want more answers on why and how. So hopefully this stays on track for next summer. And yeah, I know it's like, I'm on the edge of my seat. And then I'm also hearing like, well, you might not even hear it at the trial. We have to hear it or we're all going to lose our minds. But yes, so keep an eye out for the pre-recorded Watts video. House Huddle is going live tonight on her channel on the Watts case. I believe she said 9:30. Correct me if I'm wrong, the House Huddle, if you're still here. So if you guys want to deep dive into the Watts case again tonight, hop over on her channel. Maybe, okay, yes, she is here. It's crazy. It's taking so long, expected, but ready for the trial. I know. Oh, thank you, Delana. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is our first like little family trip. We did a family trip for a wedding, but I mean, a wedding is kind of like an obligation. It's not really like a vacay, even though we turned it into one, visiting the beach. But yeah, this is like our first little family trip together. It's like her last hurrah before she's not an only child anymore. So wish us luck. I hate flying, but wish us luck. And I will talk to you guys as soon as I get back. I will be back the following Saturday. So then I'll be going live that Monday. So not next Monday, but the one after that. And we'll get back into our weekly or nightly live streams on multiple cases. So hopefully we get some new information from Sebastian Rogers by then. Like I need an update and I need one from law enforcement, a significant one. Paul hates flying too. It's just, yes, Cindy, we are. She's going to love it. She's at that age where everything's going to seem real to her. Like she's going to think that the princesses are real, etc. So we another reason why we're like pushing to go now, because in a couple years or even in a year, she's going to start to, you know, realize that the imagination and the magic like isn't real. You know what I mean? But yes, we will talk very soon, guys. Thank you to my moderators. Thank you to the members. Thank you to everyone who hit the like button and participated in chat. And just for being here. And I will, yes, that's exactly what my doctor said. Just stay hydrated and not just water. Like I need like electrolytes. So that will be the name of the game. And I will see you guys soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you again to everyone who's gifted already, and keep an eye out for my pre-recorded video on the Watts. I hope you guys like it. And again, I'll talk to you guys later. So goodbye.